Have you all been in that spot maybe one time or another where we've had a difference with someone? Maybe it's at work or at school. Maybe it's a member of the family. Maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe it's somebody in the larger community. And that difficulty has not been resolved yet. So it's kind of festering out there. And, maybe there's an awkwardness. You see this person often. And you don't quite know what to say or how to kind of carry yourself. And one day you might even find yourself practicing some words to say when you do see somebody, if you're going to bury the hatchet on this. And that moment comes, and it doesn't work well. Maybe it's worse off than it was before. That step to escalate it, didn't bring about peace in this thing. It didn't resolve things, did it? We have those things. It's part of our experience in human life. Well, there's some things in the reading today that can help us. Let's think a little bit. If we're thinking we're alone on this, let's go back to that first reading today from the first book of Samuel. And by the way, you remember Samuel. He's that prophet that God has called to help Israel find their kings. Samuel's around for a little while. He helps us select the first 3 kings, okay? And we find our first reading today. We're in the midst of, say, it's Saul as the king, and David's being pursued. What's that all about? Here's a little background. Saul's the first king of Israel, and he's a good king. And by the way, those first 3 kings, Saul and David and Solomon, are good kings. The other kings, not so much. They draw the country into war. They tax the people heavily. They are more concerned about, say, surrounding themselves with the trappings of royalty and leadership than in serving the people. And yes, Saul and David and Solomon are faithful and lead the people to be faithful to God too. Okay? So what's happening here? Well, Samuel reappears and tells Saul, I have your successor. The king is not pleased. If only because he's thinking about, look at the nations around us. Shouldn't my eldest son be the king? That's Jonathan. The Lord has something else in mind. But Saul is a good and faithful man. He continues on. But Saul is surrounded by advisors who want Jonathan to be king, and they start planting rumors that David is unfaithful. David tries to undermine King Saul. Saul, with heavy heart, seeks to bring David to justice. David hears this and escapes with Abishai, one of his attendants. And now you pick up the reading. It's night. David and Abishai find themselves wandering through the camp of Abner the general, and the king is there. They're all asleep. Abishai suggests, look, here's the king's spear. Let's end this right now. He intends to kill the king. David says, no, I cannot bring my hand to God's anointed one. Remember that Samuel anointed David too. And David takes counsel from the Lord. Instead, you heard what happens. He very wisely takes the king's spear. They go off. The next morning, he allows himself to be captured. And David is brought back to the king with the king's spear. Saul realizes that his fate was in David's hands, that David did not take his life. That begins their reconciliation. Abishai suggested that was something that didn't lead to reconciliation, but to escalation. Let's kill King Saul. Wait a minute. See the direction we're going in? We understand what it's like when things go off the tracks, don't they? How do we get out of fixes like that, spots like that? How do we get out of, let's say, like corners like that? Well, let's consider the possibility that David sought the counsel of the Lord. Could we turn to the Lord when we seek ways to resolve the differences we have with sisters and brothers and neighbors? And consider the gospel too. Jesus offers something that a lot of people tell me is hard to do. I know from time to time I feel that way too. Hey, Lord, you ask us to love everyone. Sometimes, Lord, everybody is hard to love. There are people who seem just a little bit unlovable in life. They make life difficult for whatever the reason. I see some of you smiling, you know what I mean. Listen to Jesus and his counsel today. Do you hear I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you? The world doesn't buy into that, does it? Do they? Bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. And he goes on to talk about those who seek things from you. Go ahead and give it to them. Don't seek anything back. Be merciful. as your Father is merciful to you. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned, etc., etc. You heard that. There is counsel for us to receive, counsel from the Lord, counsel from Jesus. Hey, how about the Holy Spirit? The experience of baptism and confirmation are Holy Spirit sacraments. Can we take into account that the Holy Spirit is there to guide us and to lead us on the ways, to follow the experience of Jesus along the way? It is good that we have the Spirit in our lives. In fact, if you have Eastern Catholic friends, maybe in your family or among your friends or co-workers, our Eastern Catholic friends have very much a sense of prayer to the Holy Spirit. That's part of their spiritual DNA. Maybe we could learn something from them on that, to seek the counsel of the Spirit to help us in moments like this. So may we give thought to say just where we can go to seek to resolve that which is ruptured, seek to bring about peace rather than discord. Can we find ways to find ourselves being with the Lord and taking advantage of all the good counsel he has? Imagine how different the world could be if we were to do this indeed. Blessings, folks. Let's keep in mind that we can find ways with the Lord's help to resolve the problems we find ourselves in. If only we had, as Jesus says, to you who hear, listen to what I say. May we take to heart the good counsel of the Lord.